boss. My husband and I have a Universal Servo Group, and we've been in business for about 15 years now. So if you have any servo motors, valves, hydraulic, any kind of need like that, CNC machines, whatever, we'll be happy to help you. But anyway, I want to thank you all for coming today. We've got a great luncheon, as I think everybody's partaking in, so I want to thank Ruby's for catering today. And I'm going to ask Eddie if he doesn't mind coming up and giving a prayer for us.
Do mind. Thanks, Megan Power. It was Shannon. Appreciate that, baby. So I've become the de facto prayer all of a sudden. I gotta quit coming to these things. But let's pray. Lord, Heavenly Father, thank you so much for the beautiful weather that you provided us today. And Lord, as we come into a new season of spring, and we just look forward to what the future has to hold for each person here and in our community. Lord, we just especially pray today for those in Ukraine that are fighting. And Lord, just be with them there and give them the strength. And Lord, we pray for your hand to be in that situation. Thank you for each business member that's represented here today. Lord, continue to bless their business and give them the guidance and help them make decisions that glorify you. Thank you for those that prepared this food. In your name we pray. Amen. I got to do the pledge. All right, let's do the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated, and our flesh will be powered as we seated.
All right. Thank you all so much for coming out. He always wonders why I ask him because he always does such a phenomenal job. Thank you all so much for coming out today. So glad the weather is so nice and a sea of green that we have out here. So very happy to have you all here. I'm going to go over some of the announcements and the events that we have coming up, but we also have calendars on your table. There are so many that I would spend a lot of time up here. I will cover them all that will be happening before our next meeting, business luncheon, but just highlight a few. We do have a ribbon cutting at the Holiday Inn Express on Thursday, March 24th at 3 p.m. So you can see that beautiful facility. Saturday, March 26th, we have our 4th annual Mountain Madness 15K trail run. We still have some room for some to come and either volunteer or run it. It is pretty treacherous. It's not your favorite part if you haven't been walking, I would suggest it. But it is beautiful. It's out at Boston Parks. It will begin at 8 a.m. Then we have a business after hours with Universal Servo. They're hosting next Tuesday, March 29th. It is going to be at the Dawson County High School College and Career Academy. So we'll be able to show off that beautiful building that Damon and his team have built out there and showing you a lot of the work-based learning stuff and the pathways that they have going. And it's really how lucky our kids are that they get to experience that. We are also doing the lunch for the Teacher of the Year. So we're accepting donations. We do baskets for each one of those teachers. There's always 7. So we like to do baskets to commemorate and celebrate them for the winning Teacher of the Year. So if you have any items, you can bring them by the chamber. By April 8th, we would love to have, or call us and Jessica can swing by your office and pick them up. But it's a great time to celebrate those teachers. Saturday, April 30th, we are opening the Farmers Market. I know Cindy's going to talk about that as well, but it will be open every Saturday from 8 to 1 or until they are sold out. We'll open up some more hours and days as produce and other items start coming in, but we will be opening it, the grand opening on April 30th. And now I'm going to turn it over to Savannah. Be sure you can look at your calendar for all the other events coming up, and Savannah's going to go over the new members.
Hi, as Manny mentioned, I'm Savannah Garrett, the Membership Director for the Dawson County Chamber. So we do have quite a few members since our last luncheon, so bear with me for a minute. Specialty Orthopedics, Candy's Corner, Sensi, Southern IT Solutions, Team D&D Consulting, Higher Dynamics, Nikki Martin, Highlight Realtors, Adobe, Edward Jones, Joaquin, Scenic South Landscape and Design, Lead Edge Design Group, and North Georgia Roofing and Property Renovations. So I know that we have some new faces in the room. Does anyone want to introduce? Do we have any of our new members in attendance today? I would like to. No, just kidding.
Well, I wasn't planning on speaking, but I do carry a 20-minute speech in my pocket, so you're in luck. No, Scott came with Edward Jones. My office is actually in Forsyth County, but I do a lot of business up here in Dawson. I live very close to here, so I'm really excited about getting to know everyone. I know a few faces in here, so anytime you want to schedule, get some coffee. If you're a golfer, I'm not that great, but I love to golf, so hit me up.
Thanks, Scott. Anyone else?
Hey, I'm Tiffany Sullivan. I just launched my business in January. It's called Better Life Senior Solutions. And this is my grandmother here on the front. She just turned 91. She said she's too young to be the face of a senior business, but it's all relative. But basically what I do is connect families to independent living, assisted living, memory care, personal care homes, as well as home care. My service is free because a lot of times families just don't know where to look, where to turn, and I partner with communities that then reimburse me. So it's great. It's non-biased, and I can help people along the way navigate through that hard time. So happy to help.
Hi, I'm Paul Serge from Three Cats Marketing. I tell people that I help them with the marketing that doesn't suck. I use a really powerful framework to help clarify your marketing message and then build website assets and lead generators and sales funnels off of that. I do have some free books here if anybody wants one. Let me know.
You'll have to.
I'm Keisha. I'm with Medicine Home Health. So we do skilled nursing, physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy. So for in Medicare, covers it 100%. So if you have anyone who's just had surgery and needs a nurse or physical therapist to come see them in their home or at a hospital, whatever the needs may be.
Hi, I'm Ellen Harrison. I'm here today with the North Georgia Conservation Coalition. And we just want to make sure you're invited to an Earth Day Network event on Saturday, April 23rd over at the Walden Arts Center from 10 to 2. There'll be lots more beautiful artwork by award-winning children artists, great pickup. There's also going to be an electric car vehicle expo. If you're curious about all the other makers besides Tesla, come out and check us out. And also, we'll have a group there that specializes in writing grants. They're a nonprofit, and they help churches do energy audits and get grants to retrofit and reduce their utility costs. I know some churches have had trouble meeting their budgets during the pandemic and lower attendance, but probably not. So come on out and join us, and we'll have food. Oh, we have flyers.
We have flyers, and I was like, take one. We put some there, but this has the website and the email address of where you can reach us.
All right, thank you, Savannah. And I will do a little plug for Savannah. She is also the head of our ambassador group, and we have just relaunched that program. So if there's anyone here that has any interest in wanting to be an ambassador, please get in touch with Savannah. We have a really dynamic. Do I have any ambassadors? I know I have ambassadors on the committee. Stand up if you're an ambassador, and you can talk to one of them. I was going to say. All right. Does a great job in helping put that together, so thank you for that. Well, we are so excited to hear from a couple of people today, or a few people. As you all know, we've changed up our business luncheons this year, and in January we heard from the county, and then today it's going to be all about Dawsonville, and they're going to be talking about some great things happening within our city here, and then later on you'll hear from some other great parts of our community. But today I'm very happy to introduce you to Councilman John Walden. He is councilman for Post 3. He's also the mayor pro tem. So he wants to say a few words. John?
I won't say nothing much long, but I just want to share what's going on in the city of Dawsonville. Here pretty soon, we'll start food truck Friday night here pretty soon. Keep your eyes on that. That's a great time for the community to come together, people socialize and all that. And the last one I've been to, I think is the last one of the year. You'd be amazed who shows up, because if you don't see lost friends a long time, odds are you might run across there. So it's a good time for, if you haven't seen an old friend, show up there. You might see them. It's like the experience going to Walmart. You might see some lost friends there. Also, here in the Main Street part back here, we got some things hopefully coming up ahead. We're looking to add probably a basketball court, pick a ball, and some other stuff. And so keep your eyes on that. But I know Main Street Park's been occupied, a lot of kids enjoying it and so forth. And so I'm glad to see it grow. And you know, my girls, every free afternoon, there's nothing. Can we go play that? A lot of times I have to say, no, you got your chores done yet? You know, but you don't have to work too that early though. But other than that, we love it. It's a great thing for the community. And I'm not going to speak much longer. There's two special guests here with the city, Elliott, Georgia Race Hall of Fame, and Phil Everly with the lead edge, and talk about the airport. But I'm very thankful for the citizens. It's great. I cannot think of no better place to live than right here in Dawsonville, Georgia. This is a great community. I've been here since summer 1985 when I moved here. And I have never seen, if there's something happens to the community pulls together to help people out. And I'm very proud to say that I live in Dawsonville, Georgia, because this is a very strong community. People help each other out. And I'm very thankful to be living here. And I'm grateful for the chamber, thankful for this song and everything. They do an excellent job. And so if there's anything I can do for you, don't hesitate to reach out to me. And I'll try to get whatever I can this evening. Thank you all very much.
Now, it is my pleasure to introduce, she really needs no introduction. We all love her. She's so active in our community. But Cindy Elliott, she's the director of the Racing Hall of Fame since February 2021, where she works alongside many enthusiastic volunteers who are just as passionate as she is about the heritage of racing in our area. Cindy has also worked with Bill Elliott Racing and Chase Elliott Motorsports as needed, and is involved in the philanthropy efforts of the Chase Elliott Foundation and Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. So help me.
Hello, my name is Cindy Elliott, and I work with a very large group of passionate volunteers over at the Georgia Racing Hall of Fame. We do a lot of different things that I just thought quickly I would go through and let you all know, because I don't know that you know that we do a lot of event planning over there. We have the newly renovated Gordon Purple Room. We also do events like the gala event last year in the museum, where we push cars out and we make room for a couple hundred people. So sometimes that can be challenging because you have to move cars out in order to do those larger events, but we do those events, and we do different things like we have a ghost walk. We did our first ghost walk last year. It was very successful. We're going to do it again this year. We're going to do it in honor of Judy Harris, who we tragically lost this year. But she was a very big part of that event last year, and I really don't know how we're going to do it without her, because she was just phenomenal. We do car shows, and we do have an auction coming up, and it'll be our first auction. There is a flyer over on the table somewhere over there. Please pick one up, and if you have any car that you'd like to put in the auction, you're certainly welcome to do that. Right now, I think we have around 165 already registered for the auction. So we're looking forward to that. That'll be April 23rd. And then Mandy already mentioned the farmer's market. That's going to be opening April 30th of this year, so it'll be a week after the auction. And on the back of that flyer, you'll see a list of all of the events that the museum does put on throughout the year. So please pick one of those up. One thing that I thought I would mention while I was up here is that we have a lot of really interesting things over at the museum. If you haven't been there lately, it's probably changed quite a bit. We are the birthplace of stock car racing, and we really need to embrace that as a community. It's really not just about Bill and Chase Elliott. We have somewhere around the neighborhood of 20 different champions in different series, and their car owners on display. They're all from Georgia. It's the only history museum that is only about Georgia and this region. We have a lot of creative people from this area. We have the engineer who originally designed the safer double barrier guardrail. Of course, now it's the safer barrier, but many years ago it was just a double guardrail trying to keep cars from exiting the speedways. We have the driver who developed the Pond device that drivers wear in every series of racing out there. He also won the 24 Hours of Daytona. And we have Gene White, who was just inducted into our Hall of Fame last year, but he developed the safety check valve. So when cars flip over, gasoline no longer spills out and they're engulfed in flames. He was the best friend of Fireball Roberts, who actually died in a crash that way. So he decided to do something about it, and he also developed the collapsible fuel cell, which is used today in airplanes, cars, all sorts of things. Airplanes, Bill. Let's see, but a lot of very interesting things. We have the only husband and wife race team in NASCAR's history ever on display over at the museum. So lots of different things to see. Please take the opportunity to come by and visit us. We'd love to have you. One more thing, I worked with UNG, and they put together a wonderful PowerPoint that we've been using, and they've been really helping us a lot with our social media efforts, and they're going to be the ones really behind all of the social media that we're going to be putting out on the car auction that's going to be coming up. So if any of you have local businesses that need some help in your marketing, you know, UNG is there. Carolyn Munzo, I think, is that right?
Karen Munoz in our department. Yeah, Karen Munoz in our marketing department.
Yeah, and they did a fabulous job for us, so I can't say enough about them. And if any of you have a need for that, please reach out to them.
Thank you, Cindy. I think we all take it for granted that we have such a dynamic opportunity to have the Racing Hall of Fame here in the community, and there are still so many of the citizens that have never been through or gone through. I'm always amazed about how many people just have never even been inside. So we're very lucky to have that history here and have Cindy at the head of that and really taking it to new levels. So very excited about that. And I do understand she's going to be a little modest, but I do believe she has a birthday coming up. So make sure you tell her happy birthday. I heard she does happy birthday week, so I wanted to make sure we do that. So, happy birthday, Cindy. All right. We're going to move on and talk about, we're going to introduce Phil Everly, who is, probably saw him here a couple of years ago. And he is with Lead Edge Design Group, and they're responsible for helping with the Elliott field. He is the president of Lead Edge Design. He has over 40 years of experience in site planning, engineering, and construction. Phil's experience includes over 500 airport planning and design projects at over 75 airports, including every project at Cherokee County Airport in the last 25 years. He is a past member of the Cherokee County Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors, and he's a graduate of Leadership Cherokee. Help me with a round of applause for Phil.
Remind me to talk to you about this. Okay, I'm Phil Everly with Lead Edge Design Group, and that five of us that come from Cherokee County.
As like the chamber.
That's right. Thank you so much for having us. Phil Everly, President of Lead Edge Design Group. With me today is Amanda Roston. I'll sum up Amanda by saying Georgia Trend Magazine top 4. Amanda Roston. So we're going to talk today about, just give you some baseline information about aviation in Georgia, general aviation, what that is, and then specifically we'll talk about Elliott Field, it's right here in your community, and how general aviation impacts in a positive way the whole state, and then how it relates to you. And also, the very last slide of the presentation ties in racing and aviation. If it comes up, it does. If it doesn't, I'll just a little bit about Lead Edge Design Group. So there are, in Georgia, there are 159 counties. There's 103 public use airports. So not a private strip that someone has, but public use airports. It means it's FAA funded and it's a lot of strings attached to that. So basically 2/3 of the counties have airports. FAA requires each one of those cities and counties that owns an airport to hire and contract with a planning and engineering firm that is on an FAA approved list, which means initially all the planning and engineering stuff, we know all these really quirky FAA rules about how the airports have to be. So that's the role we play. We work with over 70 of the 103 airports around the state. So of all the firms that do what we do, nobody has that kind of footprint. So for us, we do not work at commercial airports. Those are more lucrative and we could do that. But as the president and founder of the company, is what Amanda stands for, we are going to make a difference. And we're going to work with communities that are special, that are everything that you talked about before we got an opportunity to speak today. We get to choose where we work. Now, we can't make you pick us, but of the 103 airports in Georgia, there's probably no more than 30 at any given time that we would have interest in contracting with. We need communities that have positive leadership and have positive people who want to take care of their community and have new things happen. Because if we do that, in our unique brand where we come up with ideas for your community, it'll make a bigger difference. So we're not trying to cookie cutter each place we work do the same exact thing. We're trying to tailor whatever your goals are for your community, then we can do things at the public use airport in that community that match your goals. So if it's job creation or tourism or something like that, we will adapt our ideas to match what you want to do. So that's basically, for all of this stuff, that's what we're about. And we're in a fortunate position working hard for a lot of years to have the flexibility to do that. So it's very, we're very humble and we're very proud that you allow us to be here. And we're very proud to work for the city and we're very excited about that. Of the one measurement of all the airports is based aircraft. How many planes are at the airport? We work at 5 of the top 10 in based aircraft in the state of Georgia. No other firm works at more than one. None of those airports were in the top 5 when we started working with them. So it's about growing your airport in a positive way that matches the community. So those are, we'll talk about some specific like Cherokee, Pickens, Gainesville, Abersham, we work with all those places. And they're growing in a way that matches what the community wants to see there. So if we put it in picture form, this is stuff all over the state. So we go to ACCG County Conference, GMA City Conference, Georgia Airports Association. There's we do open houses at airports. We speak at career fairs. So we're happy to come and share information with, if we have career days at your school. We're happy to come and speak about aviation careers and engineering careers. Yes.
Can I get you to hold it closer? Just speak louder. Either way, this is not great.
Yes. Well,
Very
there's something that I don't really want to if you see me do that, that's the thing you want to pay attention to. All right.
Thank you.
We basically, but we want to be really involved in our communities and really be just helpful. So essentially, when we look at airports, because we're in Georgia, Hartsfield is normal to us. Pretty much everybody's been to Hartsfield. That is not a normal airport. That's the busiest airport in the world. So if you had a globe, that's the busiest airport. that has got places, here's a technical term, wackadoodle, and it's just crazy. Right? So mostly of these 103 airports, there is about 7 or 8 that are commercial airports where you can buy a ticket and fly. Macon and Athens kind of get commercial service and lose commercial service, right? But we're talking about like Valdosta, Augusta, Columbus, places like that. But most of them are just general aviation airports, which is recreational and business use of aircraft. Okay, general aviation, that's it. General aviation is about 5,000 general aviation airports. There's about 500 commercial airports. So the vast majority, like we look at Georgia, and we say there's 103, 7 to 8 commercial. The rest are really what Elliott feels like. In Georgia, from a technical design standpoint, without putting you to sleep, basically the elevation and the temperature of a location have a lot to do with the performance of the aircraft. So higher elevation, the wing's not as efficient, the air's not as dense. So for a plane that needs to fly to Colorado, for example, you need a longer runway in thinner air, in higher elevations and hotter temperatures. And you have a shorter runway, you have the same performance if you're closer to sea level and if the temperatures are cooler. Thank you for staying awake during that part. So in Georgia, 5,000 feet, roughly. All planes perform differently, but roughly at 5,000 feet, you can take on enough fuel. The runway length is based on, you take on fuel, it makes the plane heavier, and you have to have a certain amount to get off the ground. So in Georgia, at 5,000 feet, you can take on enough fuel to get to an arc that's kind of Texas, Iowa, Wisconsin, New Jersey, if that makes sense. Right? So you take on that much fuel. If you had a 5,500, you might be able to get to like Denver. If you had 6,000, you can probably start to reach the West Coast. And then it depends if you have a headwind and other conditions in there. But roughly, runway length equates to how much fuel you can take on, not how big the plane is. So if a plane was really big and it was flying from Chattanooga to Marietta, it doesn't matter. It'll just take on a small amount of fuel. It'll land at a shorter runway. So that's one thing that we'll pass on today. Also, pilot intimacy. Are there any pilots in the room?
Chris.
Not for money, that's correct. Would you like to say your last name, sir? So I'm a pilot. Amanda is taking lessons now. We actually pay after 6 months. We don't make you, but we'll pay for you to learn to fly if you'd like that, because it helps us with design. It helps us communicate and share information. But what you taught when you're in the flight, you are the pilot in command. Every decision made in that plane is on you. So the airport, equate this, like you're driving a car, the airport and the runway is like the highway or the road. The road's not responsible if you're distracted driving or you turn, run a red light, that's on you, that's not on the road, right? So from a pilot command standpoint, they're responsible for the entire flight. Elevations, they must be above the ground. And like I said, the pilot's like the driver. So take that into context. So if ever there was an issue where you had a plane that was low or was causing an issue or something, you can get the tail number out there and call that bad. But it's not, it doesn't have to do with the airport. Right. We talked about this a little bit already. 103 public use airports in Georgia. There's some economic numbers on there. It's a huge economic impact. There is an aviation fuel tax that you do not pay at the regular pump. There's an aviation fuel tax. That tax on the users of the airport goes into a pot of money with FAA. That pot is used to fund infrastructure projects at public use airports. And for those projects, FAA typically fund 90%. So this could be a runway extension, or runway rehab, or an apron expansion, or a taxiway, or something like that. But it's funded out of that aviation fuel tax. It's not funded out of the money that would go anywhere else. And then some of those projects have a 5% DOT aviation programs, including a 5% matching and 5% local. DOT has a sum funding at 75-25 for aviation. The category, when you're designing the airport, you put each plane into a category based on wind speed and wingspan and approach speed. So the smaller the plane, the smaller the category. Like a little Piper Cubs, like an A1 small, and then you get larger and larger as the jets get bigger. And effectively, in the design criteria, we have to make like the runway width or the separation between runway and taxiway, it gets bigger as the category of the airport gets bigger. Okay? So mostly when we're talking about general aviation airports, it would fall into a category B2. And the B2 means you design kind of a certain way on that. So there's not a radical upgrade. You can't get funding for a category that you're not. That makes sense. So some of the stuff that we're saying today is to, when you read about airports somewhere, you look at something, we're going to talk about kind of where some of this comes from and how it's looked up. I mean, you can differentiate between real or not based on what you learned today about these categories. So Georgia DOT aviation programs has a separate way of categorizing airports from FAA. So they have a system that they call level 1, level 2, level 3. Level 1 is 4,000 foot runway or less. Level 2 is 5,000. Level 3 is 5,500. The only reason we're showing this is that DOT aviation does an update, they call it a state system plan, and they'll do an update on airports in the state every 5 to 10 years. They'll do a report. That report does not incorporate information that came from the airports. So if you go Google and look up those reports, what it says is needed for the airports isn't necessarily based on something that follows that criteria. So when we look around the state, these are categories kind of that go to runway lengths of what's out there. And at any given time, there's runway expansions going on, things like that. And if you think about what I was just saying about 5,000 feet, if an airport has a runway that's 4,000, your ability to do much other than very small recreational stuff is limited. And if you think about an airport, what it costs to mow the grass and replace the light bulbs on the runway in a 4,000 foot airport versus a 5 is not a lot different. But you can't sell fuel like you could if you had 5,000 feet because the people can't take on much fuel. They can't buy much. They can't build the plane. When you accept that FAA money, hope everybody's sitting down, there's strings attached. And they're called grant assurances. And some of them are specific technically to the airport, and some have to do with how you operate the airport. So they kind of get in your operational doghouse. So if you accept FAA money, you have to follow this rules. Number 19 is basically you got to protect the ability of the airport to be an airport because they've invested money in. When you accept FAA money, you are encumbered for 20 years. For the next 20 years, you have to follow these rules. Because we typically get an FAA project every year at our airports, it's kind of almost like in perpetuity. You'll never outrun that 20-year limit. Number 24 in the grant assurance, maintain a fee and rental structure for facilities and services which make the airport as self-sustaining as possible. Basically, they invest. They require you to charge fair market value. So you're not allowed Elliott Field's private. You don't have any of this stuff going on here. There's somehow how other airports work that are public use. If the airport authority chairman wants to keep hangar rentals low because of benefits, you're not allowed. So you can imagine if you don't follow these rules, the horrible things that happen, which is starting with they stop giving you money, and then it goes all the way up to they take back all the money they've given over the last 20 years, and then more bad stuff beyond that. So you got to follow this. The last one, revenues generated by the airport must be used for airport purposes. that one, you go, wait a minute, everything we earn at the airport has to go back in the airport? So what good is an airport for a community? Well, what they're saying is that you need to invest back and do maintenance on what they do. So if they pave the runway for you, you have to keep that up. You need to weed eat and you need to do that type of thing. So what they're doing is they're looking at the airport as, since you were not allowed to take money from the airport and do something else with it. And you can think of it this way, is if their grant money came from aviation tax, then it didn't come from kind of somewhere else. So that money they expect revenue to stay on the airport. Now it can be used for things like marketing and some other connection to the airport. But effectively what that does, and you don't have any choice with it, what that does is it means the airport, you want to set it up so it generates as much money as possible, so that goes in and can match grants, and you can build hangars that generate revenue, or you can get ad valorem for the county, and there's other ways you get economic benefit from it, but it won't be by taking money off the airport. And that is something that I would say there's literally probably 25% of all the airports in Georgia do not know that rule, even though they're covered by it. When you develop on the airport, you can build hangars yourself and then lease them out at a retail rate and pay off the debt service. You can do a ground lease for 25 to 30 years, and then a private entity builds the hangar. At the end of that time period, it reverts back to the airport. So very kind of unique stuff. But from a standpoint of revenue, land leases is revenue, hangar rental, you build a hangar, lease it out. Fuel sales, typically on fuel sales, you buy the fuel and you mark it up 50 cents to $1 a gallon. And what you'll see a little bit is as fuel prices go up or down, some airports will reduce the margin a little bit to make the price more attractive, but that's a revenue source. And then for the county, the ad valorem taxes on the aircraft there. So just like you pay a car tag for planes at the airport, pay an ad valorem tax to the county if it's public use. The value of aircraft, before I talk about this, now I'll do this. The value of aircraft wildly swing. So this has one propeller in the front. It's a single engine plane, right? So one Cessna 172. On aircraft, unlike cars, most of the parts on the aircraft require replacement after a certain amount of time. So there's not an odometer in the plane, but there's a Hobbs meter, which is hours. And after so many hours, you have to replace parts for safety. So on the engine on this plane, after 2,000 hours, you have to tear down and rebuild the engine. So, and that's expensive. So if you bought this plane and it had 1,900 hours on it, it's about at a major overhaul, so it would be less than if it just had the engine replaced, right? So the caveat, when I say the value here, single engine piston aircraft, probably about $500 to $2,000 a year in ad valorem tax. So if we were a public use airport, that would go to the county. When you get into twins, wildly varying in price, so this is just a general swing here, $2,000 to $4,000 in ad valorem. So if you take all the planes on the airport, you're adding this up, and that is free and clear. That is not encumbering, doesn't have to go back to the airport. This is not large jets. This is small to medium-sized business jets. Typically 15,000 to 150,000 a year ad valorem, like your cable bill, is will never pay for. So that first picture I showed, that 172, which is like what we fly, that holds about 55 gallons of gas. So when you take on fuel, you're buying 20 or 25 gallons at a time typically. These buy much more fuel because they burn the fuel faster. All of these things are like a time machine. So the reason that you can justify purchasing these and using them is if it's a business use, you can get a lot more things done in a day. So you might be able to take that aircraft and make 5 stops around the region in a day, and if you drove, you could get 1 or 2. So if you calculate that value of what you can produce with that extra time, typically more than just, somebody's using it for business use, they run all those numbers, and that's why they're doing it. Especially in kind of in the metro area where we've got big traffic issues, it adds predictability and a real positive business model. These are surrounding airports. We're just going to take a snapshot of kind of what's going on there, so you know. So most are from the 1960s and early 70s. Governor Sanders was in office. He flew in World War II, and he was a big proponent of a tie between rural airports and economic development. So he went relentlessly around the state, spoke to civic groups, and said, if you will come up with a certain amount of property, the state will come in and pave a runway and the whole apron, and you have no bill. And that's great. And so Georgia has a lot more airports than normal states, so that's great. The one thing about it is often the property that was used was not the greatest property that they had available. So what that means now to us as we work on airports is, like Cherokee County Airport, it's built on a ridge. So you can see a little bit, kind of the ridge lines going back. So it sits really high. So anything we do there, we have to bring in dirt. So we did a runway extension. They were 3,400 feet long. So you can't do much other than recreational stuff. To get to 5,000, so they can start, the airport can start to use from a business standpoint, we brought in 3 million cubic yards of dirt. So every airport has positives and challenges. So we work a lot of places, everybody focuses on the challenges, right? Oh gosh, everybody's like, well, at least you don't need 3 million yards of dirt. And then other places have lots of issues with maybe cell towers. And then for them, it sits so high, it's not an issue at all, right? So it's all pros and cons. So it's all about making it function for the community. So for Cherokee County, 110 base aircraft, all our hangars are full. We're looking at a runway extension to get them to 5,500 and ultimately to 6. There's about 12 base jets there that came after we did the extension. The county's growing so fast that Pickens County is only about 15 minutes away to their airport. And the county, just from residential growth, we kind of overrun the airport prior to us doing that extension. So they had to decide, you kind of either do something now, or it's just going to stay a small recreational airport. The issue for Cherokee County was they had a really high number, almost 90% of the population to leave the county and go to work every day. So there were several initiatives at the time we did the extension in the county to try to make it more favorable for businesses to base there so the population didn't have to travel. And so that's specific community goals specific to them that involve why they promote that specific project. DOT, like I said, when they do some paperwork on their own and publish it, and you go online and look up the state system plan report for Cherokee County, it has on there things like, right here, it says airport apron parking and 18 tie downs, $3.2 million. Okay, we don't know anything about the project, we've never heard of it, nor is Cherokee County. And a tie down is a little anchor in the ground when you park the plane outside. For $3.2 million, you could buy brand new airplanes for all of it and give them away. So when you read things related to airports online, if it's, I was going to not say this, I'll just say, if it comes from a governmental source, it doesn't mean any involvement. So that's one of the things that we do in our world is to cut through that stuff and make sure how that gets published, that it's removed or it's not published, because it won't be helpful. And it won't, it certainly, if it doesn't make sense to us, it certainly won't make sense to the public, right? How are you going to justify that? And they think that number came from somewhere, and it didn't. Pickens County. So we just finished. These are new hangars out there. All the airports in North Metro area all have demand on hangars. There's more people that want than there are spaces. But the hangars cost money to build, and they need the space to build them on. So it's a challenge. So we built 19 new, they're called T-hangars. They look like a rectangle from the air, but inside there's little partitions that make this T-shape. The airplane from the air is like a T-shape, so you push the airplane backwards and forward. We added 19 hangars in December of 18. We just added 27 more that just opened up there. And they still have a waiting list. So there's a high demand of people that want to be kind of in this region that was say from I-75 all the way to 90. And now there are 92 based aircraft, 13 in the state. They were, had about 46 or something like that. They also have some things that are really unique. It says add 50 auto parking spaces. I don't know why we want to add 50 auto parking spaces, but it'll cost $320,000 to do that. So again, as an example, that's not something that we need to look for. Gainesville is a World War II era airport. Has 2 runways, kind of in the T configuration. It is completely full. If you think of the 2 runways making kind of 4 quadrants, 2 of the quadrants have hangars on, aviation use. 2 of them are industrial parking. There is literally no space up there. We did a hangar for Fieldville Corporation up there and had to tear down 2 hangars to build a hangar so they could put their new corporate jet up there. Falcon 900. Nice. They had a jet. They approached us about taking their hangar and trying to raise the roof on the hangar so they could fit the height of talent in. And so you get into that kind of thing when you're so constrained, there's so much demand. So that's a challenge for them, it's just space. But the demand is very high. There are 142 based aircraft, 5th in the state. They could double that easily with that type of space. We'll see you guys the gist of these things, I think. Habersham County, 5,500 foot by 162 based aircraft. Their hangars are full. They're very constrained around the airport, so we just signed a task order to add 2 community hangars and 4 60 by 60 boxes. So we'll keep adding hangars for them, but they're very constrained on space. And I'll say this, for all of these airports that we're talking about, there is no build it and they will come. The demand is already there. There's a waiting list for hangars. It's just whether you can provide it. So let's talk about Elliott Field. So a unique thing about the airport is it's very unusual in that if somebody has a private strip, it may be that they have a farm and there's a grass strip out and a little Piper Cub or something like that. So this is all these other airports, business use and recreational use. So Elliott Field is 40 years old and was built from a business perspective to be able to fly the races and use it and not have to go to Gainesville or Cherokee. And if you think of that plane being like a time, whether it's a single engine piston or a jet, it's a time machine. You can do more things in less time. If you have to leave here and drive through Cherokee or Picnics or Gainesville or Habersham, you're killing, you're close to an hour each way, right? So it's defeating some of that. So the airport's built a private strip just to help with getting to races and time saving. It is 5,700 feet long because you think of the use is they're using it as a footprint of the whole U.S. to go to all the races, right? So that shows you exactly what we're talking about. You've got to get to that kind of length to take on enough fuel to reach those places. So you have that now. If we took what's out there now compared to the 103 airports, that'd be about 60 of them based aircraft. Just as a private strip, there's not even, just tell me how much demand there is kind of around. The runway length is something that obviously all neighboring airports would feel to have that 57 feet. And sorry, there at the bottom was like Gainesville's 55, Cherokee's 5, PDK, longest to go in front is 6. So again, it's just the usability part of it. These are some aerial photos. So yeah, that's it. It's 5,700 foot long. It's a great, great airport. Again, half the airports in Georgia, if they could look like that, that'd be wonderful. But they don't have the runway length, they don't have the space, they don't have. So you don't have some of the quirkiness here that was driven, the positives out of Governor Sanders' stuff. But because of the landing, it was very routine, especially to the sides of the runway. And this is just kind of some zoom ins of the hangars and aircraft out there. Fuel farm, avgas and jet fuel. Piston engine aircraft burn avgas, which is like a high octane car gas, basically. Jets burn, it's like a kerosene. So two different types of fuel tanks for those. They're in place at the airport now. We do fuel farm installations. We're doing one out in Washington, Willis, Georgia. 2 tanks going in that are like this, and that's about a $350,000 project. So they already exist, they're already out there, because that was a need that they ended up when they built the airport. The type of things that are out there in hangars now are just, small jets that use in the facility now. So if this flipped to public, if FAA agreed to bring this into my first acronym, I think, of the presentation, you're welcome, NIPIS, National Plan of Integrated Airport Systems. We live acronyms already. We can barely speak English at the moment. NIPIS, National Plan of Integrated Airport System. To be accepted, when FAA accepts you into the NIPIS, you're now eligible for FAA funding and also the strings attached to it. So there is a ton of paperwork and analysis and things like that I think that goes in with bringing the airport to the NIPIS. But FAA has identified for decades now that there is a need somewhere in this corridor for an airport. And the problem is those are also the same folks that make all the rules that make it almost impossible to build a new airport. So if you have all the money in the world and you want to build a new airport, it will take the turnaround time on paperwork not very fast. So it's very time consuming. So years ago, in a neighboring county to here, years ago I was involved with site selection, and FAA was actually getting money for an airport. At the last second, the county decided, after they signed everything, they decided not to move forward with it. And at that point, just because of the growth, residential growth, not just DU, that was not likely to happen. But there is an airport here already that's 5,700 feet long. So it's going to continue to be a private use airport. If FAA accepts us, what would happen is they would basically supply funding for it. You could make it match FAA standards, and then it has to follow all the rules to go with it. Like we said before in the revenue, the fuel sales now, just out of what's out there, those fuel sales are, the revenue that comes in from that is higher than the majority of the airports in Georgia. So there's enough revenue just off the fuel sales to pay for all the maintenance of the upkeep and things like that, before you get the FAA money for infrastructure and projects. If there's new hangars, like we said before, they can be paid under lease, and then they revert back in the future, and then you get all the revenue that comes off of them. So the FAA criteria on airport geometry, the runway right now varies a little bit. It's roughly about 40 feet. The FAA standard is 75. So we always joke in the office that the family has very great motor skills. So and 40-foot runway, the FAA would like to see that 75. So the length is fantastic, but that's the type of thing we get FAA funding that we would have to do that standard 75 feet. When you light it, the little lights that sit 10 feet off the edge of the pavement, you have to get the lights. There's the new entrance road into the property because right now it comes through the race shops, right? So, and then also on the end, a little teacup turnaround, so when you taxi down again, you can pull off and do other stuff like that. So just some basic things that FAA requires that can be upgrades, but if you did the upgrades, they're also participating in funding all of that. So that's a snapshot of what's out there and what would need to be done. And here's your last slide. Does anybody know who that is? I will pass out if you know. This is tied to aviation and racing. A lot of drivers are pilots. A lot of team owners are pilots. This is from 1911. That is Ray Haroon, who won the very first Indianapolis 500 in 1911. That's the very first, in front of him, you can't barely see it. That's the first use of the rear view mirror in the car. 1911 Indianapolis 500. Ray Haroon wins, and he's also flying that day. I think that might have been more dangerous than but there's definitely a time that it goes all the way back there. And so in summary, basically, Elliott Field right now is about, kind of halfway of the 103 of just kind of how it functions now. Obviously, a big demand for hangars in the area. There's economic ripple effect that goes with the planes are there and businesses are there. They need maintenance, the people need lunch. They need to have support and job creation. And again, decision makers don't thrive on that. So whatever happens, you're well positioned. You're getting great benefit from it. But we did want to take and give you kind of how that aviation stuff works overall, what's going on around the neighborhood airport, and hopefully that's all. Is there any questions that we can answer to this? Yes.
What about your little wood glider over there?
That's an excellent question. Okay, so we thought it was important to help all this information to also understand aircraft ownership. So we have also with gliders up here to give anyone who wants. I would throw this, but if I hit someone, it might ruin the whole experience. I'll let you throw it. That can work that thing. Any other questions?
I have a question. So if Elliott Field was brought up to FAA standards and you widen the runway,
Yes.
what type of aircraft are you talking about for breaking in?
So no different. It's a B2 airport, right? So yeah, that's it. So one of maybe the biggest message of all, we give these talks all over the state is the runway length and things to do with the runway don't have to do with bigger aircraft because there's only so much weight you can get off the ground. That's why if you go to those runways are like 10,000, 12,000. There's commercial airports are 14,000 because those planes are so big and heavy. They need that to get off the ground, even before you start putting fuel in. So at our runway, you can't get something that size even if you want to because you can't get it off the ground. That's great.
Where is all of this in the process for the application made? Are people looking at it? Is this going forward? What are you doing about it?
Right. So it's the federal government. So and application. What they do is they look in their NICS, they look at the head areas and what airports cover, and where there's blank spots and where there's demand and things like that. So they have identified before that this corridor they'd like to see. The closest thing to the south, PDK, and you can go up to like Blairsville and anything up there, and you've got that big distance side to side. So the difference with this that's attractive to me is the fact that it's already exists. So now you're talking about, like I said, if they want to build a new airport in Spalding County, Griffin, that they've been working on here. That you can Google that and see things from 10, 15 years ago where they're kind of getting started, and it still doesn't exist yet. But that thing started with like $60 million, and then that was probably in the 80s, and it's just such a chunk of money. This exists, so it's really just fine. Then you're making those improvements. Those improvements are about, for us to do that stuff, that's probably $6 million to do the lighting, overlay, to make it uniform, new road, and little teacup and the lights. So there's just some attractiveness there because it's so easy. Nobody has a private airport that matches what we've been trying to put asphalt in. So we'll see. I think we spoke in 2019. Listen, it will take several years before we even know. But they analyze, they do that kind of thing. The bottom line is you have an airport that's been there for 40 years, that's functioning now and does positive things for the community. If you get FA money, then you'll make those improvements at 90%, and then it'll fall under all those encumbrances. But because of what's out there, like the fuel farm, you'll get the benefit out of it.
So it sounds like there's probably some things that are outside the scope of what that $6 million would cover. How much do you think it would cost to bring it up to where you need it to be?
So you don't need length. So the $6 million is just to get it to meet kind of the infrastructure standards, like runway width. It needs to be marked to the FAA standard, the lights have to be a certain distance off and all that stuff. So that's about $6 million. And you have to land on that around it. But you may be 24 million total with all that in flattening out some areas that require certain geometry to be flat. Things like that. They wouldn't have that facility because you already have hangars out there. So it's already a very good thing.
In your planning, where's your projected new road coming on?
It's just, all it is in where the race shop, like if you go up Elliott Parkway and where you turn in the race shop, kind of where those buildings are, the property one's right behind the building. And I think there's a out parcel. So it's kind of the next thing past that. We just, so that for access in, you wouldn't drive through the race shop to the private property. It's just enough forward to punch that road. And that's kind of like the runway anyway, so it's where we normally put something like that.
If this goes through and it becomes a public airport, it will be no tower, correct? We're not gonna have a tower, and how much extra activity do you think would be coming through the airport?
So, if you want to come hang out with really cool people, you can go with us to the Contract Tower Conference held in Washington, D.C. every July. Those are not the cool people from class, I can tell you that. So the tower stuff is, we're there, so we can throw some. It's really, the level of activity it takes to get a tower is way higher than everybody would think it is. So commercial airports have towers. If you think of a non-commercial airport that has a tower down here, McCollum Field has one. But that's in the contract tower program. So what you have to do is the airport has to build the tower themselves, and then FAA supplies your traffic control. How long this will take, I don't remember. Where they're trying to go is, so we wouldn't be, Gainesville's not, nobody's supposed to have one around here. You have to justify it in the system, but FAA is actually moving toward the concept of virtual towers, meaning almost like an IMAX theater, put cameras up all over the airport, then someone, say in a building in Atlanta, you go in and this room is Paducah, Kentucky, this room is wherever, and then the reason that they would do that is because they have to put those controllers at that location, and that's difficult to do. So if they ran it that way, you could literally say, somebody called in sick, you can come over here and do that. And then, looking at some examples of that, if there's movement, the software can do a red box around it, help draw your attention. That's what they're thinking, right?
But if this goes public, you're not seeing.
You already have. Yeah. So what happens, like those jets are doing, they're not flying, they're business use, and they're gone, and then they're gone for several hours or a day, and then they come back. You have business you brought in, but so your based aircraft, you would probably ultimately reach similar numbers to what those surrounding airports are. And activity-wise, with VFU2, you already got enough runway. You don't need to do anything more than that. So everything in the airport exists. So, which is why it's kind of so positive, is you already have, instead of projections of things that could happen for a place that doesn't exist, they already exist, and you already have jets out there, and so we've experienced kind of similar thing. The part where we have to make geometry, where the wider runway doesn't do anything, it's just to meet the FAA scan and be eligible for their funding. Last question. Yes, sir.
So right now, the airport is self-sustainable because of the gas. You're trying to do the FAA so you can get grant money to make it public, so you can bring more businesses in. Who still has ownership of that if you do that? If you make it private to a public, how does the town, the county, and the owners get involved?
So here's what happens. So FAA terminology, they would never use simple terminology. Because that would be, why do that? Right? So they call the airport owner the sponsor. Also ties in racing. So the sponsor. So in this case, the city of Dawsonville would be the sponsor, the owner of the airport. So you have to have a sponsor. So they have to have like a city or a county. So if you go around like Cherokee County, Canton's not involved because it's not in the county.
So how does that benefit the private owner if the government is a sponsor
The private owner
of Elliott right now, right? I mean, it's a private entity.
Yeah, so I'll say this, is what we do and where we go places, every place is different, but what you have here is you have effectively the Elliots who are from Dawsonville, who used aviation and understand, like, they couldn't have become what they become without being able to time machine part of aviation. So they understand the value of it. So the fact that the 2/3 of the county would have a general aviation airport, they have it, but as they, I'm not saying this because Cindy has a birthday, but, as they get older, and that facility, if you sold it, I'm moving this far away, so she can't get me. So, plain, if it was sold for something else and it went away, you cannot recreate that. So the understanding of that value and the job creation and the economic impact around is known, and so basically there's a willingness to see if that goes forward.
So the private entity is going to sell it to the government.
No, they were gonna give it to the government.
They're going to give it.
Well,
So
here's
how it would benefit the Elliots would be that the FAA would come in and repave the runway. The FAA would lengthen it or widen it. That would not be their expense anymore.
Yeah.
So that would be a benefit.
Right, so what happens is, like an example of that, if the upkeep on the runway, like you have to pay it every 20 years, okay, so you're gonna spend, even just the way it is now, that may be a couple $1 million to pay for it. So if you're not, if you let it go, then it's gone. So the idea of being open to seeing if that they would take this or not. And we'll say this, FAA has criteria, they have rules, like, let's say it's Gainesville, let's say it's Habersham County, and you're buying land for runway protection zone or something. FAA requires they make you appraise it, do an appraisal and a review appraisal that follows FAA land acquisition criteria. You must, no choice, you must offer that number for that land. So you can't, so it's like, what's the negotiation? It's like, well, you can't give them less and you can't give them more. So it's kind of, so that's just how they're doing it, and it's their system stuff. So in this case, those improvements in the land, that's the airfield itself, FAA would give dollars for that. But it would match what they, in their criteria, what it's valued at. But that's how. Thank you so much for letting us do this.
I know we ran a few minutes over, so I appreciate y'all saying. I want to thank our sponsor, Medical Plaza 400, for our luncheon as our luncheon sponsor, and Alex and Ruby's recipes. Everyone give him. I wanted to do that again. Shannon thanked you while you ran out, so I wanted to make sure that we did that while you were here. So thank y'all so much for coming today. Hopefully this is a lot of great information. It's going to impact your community in very positive ways for a very long time. So thank y'all for coming.